Hi everyone, welcome to my channel and to this time-lapse version of a Border Collie in soft pastel. I will be releasing a full real-time tutorial series showing every part of this painting. So if you're interested in learning all about these techniques along with me, do check me out over on Patreon where you'll find my full library of real-time tutorials. But if you enjoy this here on YouTube, then please do hit subscribe. And go check out all of my other playlists here on YouTube, as I have lots more than just time lapses. This piece is on pastel matte paper. This is the sienna colour of pastel matte. And I'm working 18 inches by 14 inches, so it's a reasonably large size. And just to mention, I had a few nightmares with this painting to begin with. This was actually my second time starting the painting, and you can see from the amount of background leaves, this was not a quick painting to draw out in the first place. So the first time I started, I unfortunately discovered a fault running down through the pastel matte paper. There was a faint but noticeable line running right through the paper. So I scrapped the first attempt and decided to start over. I made a few improvements to the composition in my second attempt, so in the end it was actually a good thing that I restarted because I preferred the crop that I went for this second time round. So a fresh sheet of paper, but my troubles were not finished with pastel matte paper, unfortunately. There have been some complaints recently from lots of artists about the consistency or the lack of consistency in pastel matte paper recently. And the second sheet that I started on, although it didn't have any lines running through it, no obvious faults, it just felt off. So the whole time I worked on this portrait, the pastel matte paper just wasn't behaving how I'm used to pastel matte paper behaving. And it's the reason I chose pastel matte for this particular painting, because if you've watched any of my videos before, you'll know that I use several different papers and I tend to choose different papers for different jobs. But pastel matte is usually the one I go for when I need detail, smooth lines, crisp edges, and you can see from this background that would have been very helpful. And normally the texture and surface of pastel matte is perfect for that sort of thing. But this particular sheet and a few other sheets now that I've discovered in my collection of paper, they all seem to be a little bit different from how pastel matte normally is. And when I compare it to older sheets of pastel matte, it really feels quite different. So that's a bit of a shame because, of course, you hope that your art materials are produced to be very consistent so that you know exactly what it's going to do. And in this case, it definitely threw me a little bit throughout the progress of this painting. It took me a bit longer than normal just because of that. But I will still use these sheets of pastel matte. There's absolutely nothing wrong with them. They just have a slightly different texture than what I'm used to. So it took me a little bit longer to fight with the paper a little bit to get those lovely smooth and crisp lines, especially on the leaves here in the background. So this is something that I will go into detail on in my tutorial series. I really enjoyed creating this background, and if I had heard myself say that about 3 years ago, I would have definitely thought I was lying, because green things, and leaves in particular, are never one of my favorite things to create. But over the years, the more I force myself to do things like this, and sometimes in forcing myself to do something like this, it can be a very laborious, very tedious job sometimes on a background like this. But I'm definitely starting to enjoy working with greens a bit more these days. And it was quite satisfying to try and create all of those little outlines on the leaves, sort of like a backlit effect, which you can see happening in the photo reference. And I really wanted to try and capture that. but lots of darkness in this portrait as well. So I'm not afraid to use pure black when it's needed. And as you're going to see on the dog, I do make use of a harder black stick. In this case, I'm using the NuPastel black stick. But as many of you might be aware, the NuPastels aren't so easy to get hold of, not as individual sticks anyway. You can still buy the sets, but it's no longer so easy to get hold of the individual black sticks, which are my favorites. So I'm still working my way through my stock of NuPastel sticks, and I will be sad when they are done. But of course, there are other black, harder sticks on the market. So I always make use of a black hard stick. And that is so that I can add that darkest value in without completely overloading the paper with soft pigment. So I can get this first layer of darkness down without filling up the paper too much. And then I start to come in with my soft pastel sticks, mostly Unison pastels in this, and so many dark purples, a really lovely dark navy blue, lots of purples and blues in this coat, as is often the case with a black shiny dog, and especially one who is posing outside. So bear in mind, with the colour of fur, it might depend on where the animal is photographed as to what sort of colours you might see reflected in their coat. So an outdoor setting with an animal that is quite reflective is quite likely to have blues in there because we have a whole blue sky up above. So black dogs especially, you'll often find blues and purples, maybe even some greens if they are surrounded by greenery like this dog is. And one of the things that I really like about this photo reference is the light and shade. So the contrast in the lighting from one side of the dog's face to the other. We've got a dramatic change in lighting. And I always find that really effective in a painting. So you can see that I haven't lightened the dark side of the face too much. I haven't added more brown tones and lighter colours into the eye, for example, that's on the right. I'm really letting those darker areas be darker. I could brighten that eye a little bit and bring some of the same browns that are in the sunlit eye. But then I risk losing the lighting effect. And to me, it's really important to capture what the light is doing. And it's that will result in a very 3D, realistic portrait. But I had lots of fun with this piece, searching for extra colour within all of those dark areas. So much reflected colour on this dog. So we've got a nice shiny nose in now, and the colour continues as we come down into the white patch on the neck. Again, we've got a lovely contrasted area of light and shade. And there's really no pure white, not in the soft pastels anyway. I'm using a little bit of white pastel pencil at times for details. But in my soft sticks, I'm not actually using any pure white. So my lightest value in this is a very pale yellow tint, grey 27 in Unison codes. And then you can see in those light areas in the neck, I'm using all sorts of colours. Warm, fleshy yellow tones within the sunlit area. And then purples and greens, all sorts of other colours in the shadow section. So as long as I get the tonal value of an area correct, I can really push and play with the colors that I choose to represent that area. As long as I make sure that it is dark or light enough, you can use quite a lot of artistic license with your color choices. And this is something that I talk about constantly in my tutorials. Those color choices make all the difference in your painting. You can paint something, render it extremely realistically, but if you don't quite get the tonal values or the color temperature, then you still won't get a really convincing 3D effect. And it's absolutely my use of color that has changed my work over the years. The more I have learnt about color and been able to apply little bits of color theory in my work, the more it has progressed and improved over the years. And it's this knowledge of color theory that I really try to share throughout my tutorials. You don't need to be an absolute expert on color theory. A very small bit of color theory knowledge takes you a long, long way in art. And that's what my aim is with a lot of my tutorials. To get you thinking about color in a different way. To get you really seeing color in a different way. And my hope is that if you come and study along with me in my tutorials, that you will take away lots of these skills and be able to apply them to your own work. So the end goal is to get you going from working along with me to applying all of these techniques to your own work. So a bit of a marathon this piece. It will be a very long tutorial series because I have asked my patrons what they would like to see from this piece and they've said everything. So I'm going to include everything in this tutorial series, the background elements, the foreground elements, absolutely everything. And I really love to teach how to paint backgrounds. That's something that you'll find a lot of in my tutorials library. But I really hope that you have enjoyed seeing this come together. It's always fun for me to watch back the speedy version of these, knowing how long it actually took, and especially this piece with having to restart it all over again. So I was very pleased to get to the end and pretty pleased with how this one turned out, despite all of my troubles with the pastel paper. But if you enjoyed this, then please do hit subscribe here on YouTube and go and check me out over on Patreon if you'd like to see more. But thanks very much for watching this here, and until next time, happy pasteling.